Hi, this is U.S. Representative Rick Larsen, and welcome to my 9th Facebook Live event. It's a kind of a real interesting time right now because Congress was in session for 2 weeks. We are out for 2 weeks, and we're back in at the end of the last 2 weeks of July. Meantime, in the middle of all of this, the campaign keeps a-rolling, and we expect ballots to be dropped at the end of this week or early next week. So people will start voting as early as the first couple of days of next week. It's a very interesting time right now in my life, and I hope in yours as well, because we have a lot of work ahead of us in Congress and in this country. And over the last couple of weeks in Congress, we took steps to accomplish some of that work, and I wanted to review some of that with you. In the last 2 weeks, the House Democrats led the effort, and we passed the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act to take those first steps to end police violence in this country, to hold police accountable, and frankly, to build more trust in law enforcement. And those are the words of Karen Bass, Representative Karen Bass, who's the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who led the effort to not only develop the Justice and Policing Act, but to ensure that it got passed. It does a variety of things that are important to a lot of folks that I've talked to. It bans chokeholds, strangleholds, and no-knock warrants at the federal level. It requires federal officers to use dashboard cameras and body cameras. It prohibits federal, state, and local law enforcement from racial, religious, or other discriminatory profiling. And it creates a national police misconduct registry, in addition to many other things, including restricting the transfer of surplus military equipment to local law enforcement agencies. But this was really a first step in this Congress's effort to begin to address systemic racism and racial injustice in this country. And there's a lot of work left to do. But I'd ask you to continue to support us as Democrats as we move forward and try to get the Senate now to pass the Justice and Policing Act. We also took important steps on health care as well. This administration was not able to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, but it did a lot to undermine the Affordable Care Act and the important gains that it was making to decrease the uninsured rate in the United States and to finally stabilize premiums for people. But this administration undermined the Affordable Care Act, so this last week we passed the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Enhancement Act to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. So it expands tax credits to decrease insurance premiums and allow more middle-class families and individuals to qualify for subsidies in the exchanges. Provides funding for reinsurance initiatives. It's not important to get the details on that, but what those tools do is to help stabilize premiums in the market. And it gives Medicare the ability to negotiate lower drug prices. It's a position I've had for a long time. I voted for it many times in different bills. It's included in this bill as well. We need to protect the Affordable Care Act. We need to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. Although it didn't do this next thing, I also support providing a public option within the exchanges as well. So that's an important step forward on healthcare, but we also took an important step forward on investing in an infrastructure-based recovery. We're going to get past COVID-19, and we need to get this country back in shape and the economy back in shape, and that's why the Moving Forward Act, a $1.5 trillion infrastructure investment bill, was so important, so that when we have an economic recovery, it is an infrastructure investment-based recovery. It does a lot of things. I think most importantly, what it does, it finally turns the corner in transportation in this country to invest in cleaner and greener transportation. So more money in it for low and no emission transit investment, low and no emission ferry investment. There's increased investment in building out the electric vehicle support infrastructure throughout this country. There's more money in it for bike and pedestrian infrastructure to help our local communities get cars off the road and provide more opportunities for people to use bikes or their feet to get around. It also includes $130 billion for high poverty schools that don't meet health and safety standards to do construction and upgrade those schools. It includes $100 billion for rural broadband expansion. Very important initiative led by Jim Clyburn, the majority whip from South Carolina, to be sure that we're doing more to close the digital divide that exists in our rural areas in the United States. It does $70 billion to transform our electric grid as well, to make that more efficient, smarter, investing in new renewable energies to move that electricity through our grid and through a more efficient grid. This bill does a lot, but it does a lot of things that it's supposed to do to help us make our economy cleaner and greener when we get past COVID-19. There's a bill too that's important because we're facing eviction timelines that were set in the March timeframe as a result of COVID-19. So there's the Emergency Housing Protections and Relief Act. It's a long name, but it's there to help renters and homeowners. We'll put more money in for rental assistance, more money in for homeowners assistance as well, for those homeowners and renters, or homeowners who might be facing foreclosure and renters who might be facing eviction. And we've extended eviction and foreclosure moratoria through March of next year. All this is part of the Moving Forward Act, which is why it's so important that the Senate itself move forward on this important piece of legislation. And then, for small businesses, we did a 5-week extension for the Paycheck Protection Program to give small businesses more opportunities to take advantage of the Payment Protection Program. So a quick update on the campaign. I mentioned that ballots are going to come out soon. It is now time to get involved, and you can by going to ricklarsen.org/volunteer to join Team Larsen. We are doing almost daily phone banks. In the last couple days, I've been making my own calls, participating in virtual phone banks. We have a big Labor Day of Action phone bank on Saturday in a couple of days, and there are always opportunities to get involved in our phone banks, calling Democratic voters. We're soon going to kind of switch up the script a little bit, because they'll be receiving their ballots, and we'll be focusing a lot on getting out the vote. That is, calling voters who have their ballots, encouraging them to fill out the ballots and get them turned in. But we'll need your help to elect Democrats up and down the ballot, and to defeat my Trump Republican opponent this fall, and to defeat Trump himself. So I hope that you'll take the opportunity to volunteer on my campaign. It's ricklarsen.org/volunteer, and you can join the hundreds of groups and people who have already endorsed me. Groups have endorsed me: the Washington State Labor Council, the National Education Association, Sierra Club's national political team and the state chapter. The League of Conservation Voters Action Fund recently endorsed me as well because of my strong record on fighting climate change and protecting the environment. I want to thank you very much, League of Conservation Voters. I think that endorsement came in last week. Planned Parenthood Action Fund and NARAL, Pro-Choice America, both endorsed me because of my 100% voting record on pro-choice issues. The Washington Stonewall Democrats, End Citizens United Action Fund, the Alliance for Gun Responsibility, Victory Fund, Young Democrats of Washington, more than 60 local elected officials, and many others have endorsed me. I'd love to have you join me in the campaign. So just a couple of questions we received ahead of time for this Facebook Live event. The first one is it currently impossible to get a COVID-19 test if you're non-symptomatic anywhere in King or Snohomish County? I don't know the answer to that. I do know that Skagit County Department of Health is doing asymptomatic testing, that is non-symptomatic testing, at their drive-up test site on College Way at Skagit Valley College. And you should call the Skagit County Department of Health. I'm sure they're online or in the phone book. Remember what phone books were? Remember those? You can get a hold of them and figure out when that's open, but I know they're doing asymptomatic testing in Skagit County, but I don't know of any asymptomatic testing in King or Snohomish. And then finally, what's happening to find out more about Russian bounties paid to the Taliban for the lives of American soldiers? This is a very critical question for a lot of reasons. One reason, obviously, is that the adversary here is Russia, and the choices that the leadership in Russia is making to hire Taliban mercenaries to target U.S. soldiers. And it could be for any number of reasons. I've heard 4 different reasons why Russia might be doing this, but the other reason this is such a terrible, terrible story is because of the lack of response from the Trump administration. I can't necessarily control what Russia does. I can condemn it, and I do condemn it. But from a matter of U.S. policy, for the president to get this information, to not act on it seemingly at all, is reprehensible in my view. And so, first off, there's 2 things to be done. One is we have to hold the administration accountable for what it did or didn't do with this information. Second is holding Russia accountable as well. And there are a variety of things to do. We should not be inviting Russia to the G7 summit here in the United States, so don't start rewarding Russia. We should stand strong with our NATO alliance and work with our allies in NATO to develop appropriate response to Russia, including continuing to support Ukraine in its effort to be freed of Russian bonds. Anything that we can do to make Putin's national security policy much more difficult for Putin and his and Russians to implement is an appropriate response to the Russian bounty story. And so I hope if you have other ideas from anybody here, I'd love to hear from you, but it's something I'm engaged on as a member of the Armed Services Committee, and it's a concerning issue for a lot of us in Congress. That's today's Facebook Live event. It's the 9th one. I imagine we'll be doing a few more, and hope to see you at the 10th Facebook Live event. And don't forget, if you want to volunteer, it's ricklarsen.org/volunteer. Help me defeat the Trump Republican that I'll be running against this fall, so we can beat Trump at all levels up and down the ballot. And hope you want to be part of that. Thanks a lot, and we'll see you at the next Facebook Live event. Bye.